Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into something pretty massive. The entire God of War series, both Greek and Norse era. We're going to compare the games to the actual mythology, the classical sources they're supposedly based on.
That's the plan. And look, we have this great listener-provided breakdown, a huge list of discrepancies. But we're not just pointing fingers, right? We want to understand why these changes were made.
Exactly. It's about the creative choices. Where did Santa Monica Studios stick to the script, and where did they, completely rewrite it?
And for anyone who loves mythology, spotting these different deliberate shifts, well, that's where you get those real aha moments. You see how they built this epic story around Kratos by kind of picking.
And it's not just a few minor tweaks, is it? We're talking fundamental changes across two whole pantheons, Greek and Norse. It's a huge...
It really is. From who Kratos actually is in the myths to how the Norse afterlife even works. So yeah, lots to unpack.
Okay, let's jump in. Part 1, Greece, the original trilogy, the prequels.
Yeah.
And we have to start with the man himself, Kratos, the ghost of Sparta. His whole identity crisis is the foundation.
Absolutely. So the game version,
we
all know him. Mortal born Spartan general, makes a bad deal with Ares, loses his family, goes on a roaring rampage of revenge, eventually kills Ares, becomes the god of war himself. That's the arc.
Classic tragic hero, right? Driven by vengeance.
Yeah.
Makes for a great game protagonist.
Totally. But then you look at the myths, and there is a Kratos, spelled with a C, C-R-A-T-O-S.
And he's different.
Yeah, fundamentally different. Polar opposite in some ways. Mythical Kratos wasn't mortal. He wasn't a demigod, not in the way we usually think of it, and definitely not a Spartan warrior.
So who was he then?
He was born a god. Full stop. The actual god of power and strength. His parents were pretty significant too. The Titan Palace in Styx, the primordial goddess of the river Styx.
Wow, okay. So divine from the get-go.
Yeah.
And his relationship with Zeus. Because in the game, that's, the core conflict later on.
Right. Well, in the myth, Kratos was one of Zeus's biggest allies, super loyal. He and his siblings, Nike, Victory, Baia, Force, and Zelus, Rivalry, were among the first to side with Zeus against the Titans.
So he helped Zeus win the Titanomachy.
Exactly. And Zeus rewarded them for it, gave them places of honor on Olympus. Kratos was basically Zeus's enforcer, the embodiment of power, doing Zeus's bidding. Think of him in Aeschylus's play, Prometheus Bound. He's the one physically binding Prometheus to the rock, completely without pity.
Okay, so the game took a loyal, divine enforcer of Zeus and turned him into a mortal-born, rage-fueled god-killer who eventually takes down Zeus himself. That's quite a flip.
It's a 180, yeah. They needed a protagonist, right? Someone capable of that level of violence and power, but with a reason to hate the gods. The name Kratos sounds powerful. It evokes strength.
So they kept the name, kept the power aspect.
But ditched the entire backstory and loyalty. They needed that blank slate, that human origin story, the Spartan trauma, the murdered family.
Mm-hmm.
That's the engine for the game's plot. You couldn't really have the mythical Kratos as your hero if your goal is to kill all the gods.
It completely changes the starting point. Okay, so if Kratos' identity is reworked, what about the gods themselves, their basic nature? The game shows them bleeding red blood, right? Like Zeus, Athena, even Persephone.
Yep, big dramatic sprays of red blood when Kratos attacks.
But that's not right, is it? For Greek gods.
Not at all. It's probably the most basic fundamental. In the actual myths, Greek deities don't have blood, they have ichor.
Ichor. Like I-C-H-O-R.
Exactly. It's usually described as golden, sometimes ethereal, maybe luminous. It's the substance of the god. When Diomedes wounds Aphrodite in the Iliad, she bleeds ichor, not blood. It's proof of their immortality, their difference from mortals.
So giving them red blood in the game, what does that make them seem more killable?
I think so, yeah. It makes them seem more vulnerable, more visceral when Kratos attacks them. It kind of brings them down to a level Kratos could actually fight and defeat, but it sacrifices that core element of their divine nature, that absolute separation.
And speaking of bringing them down, what about their size? Ares, Zeus, Hades, they're enormous in the games, like building size.
Yeah, kaiju level bosses, basically. Especially the Titans, like Kronos and GoW3. Visually spectacular, obviously. It makes for incredible boss.
But mythologically, were the Olympians giant?
Generally, no. The Olympians were typically depicted as human-sized, maybe taller, more imposing radiating power, sure, but not towering monsters.
So where does the giant thing come from?
There's probably some confusion or deliberate merging with the Gigantes, the giants. They were another race, often depicted as huge, sometimes with snake legs, who fought the gods in the Gigantomachy. That's a different war from the Titans.
Ah, okay. So the game mixes Titans, gods, and Gigantes all into these massive figures for dramatic effect.
Seems like it. Again, it's visual spectacle over mythological accuracy. It raises the stakes visually. How does tiny Kratos fight?
Right. And the politics between the gods. The first game hinges on Zeus forbidding the gods from sighting each other, and Ares breaking that rule by attacking Athena.
Yeah, that's the whole setup. Kratos is chosen because the gods can't interfere directly.
Is that rule actually in the myths? Did Zeus ban divine warfare?
Nope. That seems entirely made up for the plot of God of War 1. There's no such universal ban in Greek mythology. I mean, look at the Trojan War.
Good point. The gods were all over that.
Totally. Picking sides, fighting directly on the battlefield sometimes. Ares gets wounded by Diomedes, Aphrodite gets wounded. Athena and Hera are actively plotting against the Trojans. Poseidon's involved. It's a divine free-for-all.
So the idea that Ares attacking Athens was some unprecedented violation of divine law?
It's just plot mechanics. It gives a reason for Zeus to use Kratos as a loophole instead of just smiting Ares himself, which he probably could have done. It justifies Kratos.
Makes sense for the game. Okay, let's head downstairs to the Underworld. Seems like Hades has some management issues in the games.
Oh, definitely. Starting with Hades himself, the look they gave him, it's very, demonic. Spikes, fire, kind of like something out of Doom, almost.
Yeah, not exactly subtle. How is he described in the myth?
Pretty much like his brothers Zeus and Poseidon. Human-looking, maybe pale, stern, imposing, kingly in his own gloomy way. But not a monster. He wasn't usually seen as evil, just the ruler of the dead. Unyielding, maybe, but not a demon lord.
So the game went for a more horror-inspired.
Absolutely. And his actual job performance in the game, questionable.
How so?
Well, his main job is keeping the dead and the creatures of the underworld. In the underworld, right? But in the games, shades, harpies, undead warriors, they're constantly escaping and joining Ares' army on.
So he's failing at his primary duty.
Spectacularly, it seems. The underworld feels less like an inescapable realm and more like a poorly secured.
And when Kratos himself dies, which happens a lot.
Yeah, multiple times. He often just falls into the underworld, landing in this river that seems to be on fire.
Okay, is that the Styx? Because the Styx is the famous one.
It looks like they might be suggesting the Styx, but the fiery river is actually Phlegethon, the river of fire. The Styx is the river of hate, the boundary you cross, and you don't just fall into it.
Right, there's a process, isn't there, with Charon?
Exactly. Souls are supposed to gather on the banks of the Acheron, or the Styx. Charon, the ferryman, takes them across, but only if they have the fare a coin placed in their mouth at burial.
And Kratos bypasses all that.
Repeatedly. He dies, he fights his way out, he climbs back up. No Charon, no payment, usually no permission from hate. Sometimes other gods help him, sometimes he just does it. It makes the whole concept of death and the finality of the underworld seem, well, like a revolving door for him.
A necessary mechanic for a video game where you die a lot, I guess.
Sure. But it definitely deflates the mythological weight of the underworld. And speaking of things being deflated or changed, Pandora's box, the MacGuffin of the first game.
The ultimate weapon to kill a god, kept in a giant temple on Kronos' back.
Right. Huge, ornate box. Grants Kratos godlike power.
What was it in the myth?
Well, first off, it wasn't a box.
Not a box. It's called Pandora's box.
I know it's a mistranslation that stuck. Originally, in Hesiod's text, it was a pithos.
A pithos? What's that?
A large earthenware storage jar, like really large sometimes, taller than a person, used for storing wine, oil, grain. A common household item in ancient Greece.
So not a mystical weapon container?
Not at all. Zeus gave it to Pandora, the first mortal woman, as a sort of trick or punishment for mankind after Prometheus stole fire. It contained all the evils and miseries of the world, sickness, death, toil, all that fun stuff.
And Pandora opened it.
Yep. Unleashed all the evils onto humanity. That's the origin story for why life is hard.
And Kratos finds it in the game, becoming the first mortal to reach it.
Well, no. Pandora herself was mortal, and she had it first. So Kratos definitely. And what was inside is also, the game says it contains Kratos.
Yeah, hope was the power.
In the oldest versions of the myth, when Pandora opened the jar and all the evils flew out, hope remained inside, trapped under the lid.
Hope stayed in. Why?
Interpretations vary. Maybe it was kept back as a final reserve for humanity, something to cling to. Or maybe hope itself was just another kind of evil, the torment of false expectation trapped with us. But it didn't fly out as a weapon.
So the game completely reversed that, made hope the ultimate good, the god-killing power.
Exactly. Turned a symbol of human suffering and perhaps false comfort into the ultimate heroic power-up. A very strategic narrative choice to make Kratos' victory feel, well, more hope, ironic.
Wow, okay, that's a huge reframe. Let's move into part 2. We've talked about Kratos and the gods. Now let's look at the monsters and some of the other heroes Kratos runs into, or runs over.
Right, the beast. And who better to start with than Medusa and the Gorgon? Kratos kills Medusa pretty early on, gets her head as a weapon.
Classic moment. But wrong hero, right?
Wrong hero entirely. Medusa was famously slain by Perseus, not Kratos. And another thing, in the myth, Medusa was one of 3 Gorgon's sisters, but she was the only mortal. The game makes her seem like the queen of a whole race of snakes.
And her look. The game gives her that snake tail lower body.
Yeah, that's a common modern depiction, but not really from the oldest myth. She was generally described as a woman, terrifying, yes, for hair, but the snake body came probably.
Okay. And the game has Aphrodite commission Kratos to kill her.
Which is odd. Logically, if any god was involved, it should probably be.
Why Athena?
Because in many versions of the myth, it was Athena who cursed Medusa in the first place, often for desecrating her temple, sometimes involving Poseidon. So Athena had a vested interest in.
And Medusa's gaze turns people to stone. The game uses it as like a temporary freeze attack.
Yeah, an area of effect stun, basically. In the myths, it was permanent. One look, you're a statue, forever. That's why Perseus had to use a mirrored shield to look at her reflect. He couldn't risk even a glance. The game significantly nerfs the danger.
Makes sense. You can't have the player instantly turn to stone permanent. Okay, next big monster, the Hydra. First boss in the first game. Huge, three-headed sea dragon.
Visually amazing fight, but mythological way out. The Lernaean Hydra was a land creature, or rather a swamp creature, lived in the swamps of Lerna. It wasn't a sea dragon, and it didn't have 3 heads.
How many did it have?
Usually 9. And the real problem wasn't just the heads, it was that if you cut one off, 2 grew back. Plus, its breath and blood were lethal.
Okay, so 9 heads, poisonous, land-based, and Kratos didn't kill it either.
Nope. That was Hercules, his second labor. He had help from his nephew Iolaus, who cauterized the neck stumps with firebrands to stop the heads from regrowing.
And there was one immortal head too, wasn't there?
Exact. The central head was immortal. Heracles couldn't kill it, so after defeating the rest of the Hydra, he cut off the immortal head and buried it under a massive rock. The game just has Kratos kill all 3 heads. Again, simplified for a boss fight.
Seems to be a pattern. Taking unique monsters and making them repeatable or simplifying their mechanics.
Yeah.
Like the Minotaurs?
Oh yeah, the games are full of Minotaurs.
Yeah.
Big, bull-headed warriors. Kratos fights dozens, maybe hundreds of them across the series.
But in myth.
Yeah.
Just the one.
Just one. The Minotaur, son of Queen Pasiphae and the Cretan bull, lived in the labyrinth.
Slain by Theseus.
Slain by Theseus, not Kratos, and certainly not a whole species of monster. The idea of collecting Minotaur horns for fire magic, pure invention for the game's upgrade.
Okay, what about creatures that are just in the wrong place, like sirens in the desert?
Yeah, that one's weird. God of War 1 has sirens in the Desert of Lost Souls. Mythological sirens are sea. They lived on an island, Anthemosa, usually placed somewhere near sea or southern.
And they weren't quite human-looking.
Nope. Originally, half woman, half bird. Later depictions sometimes made them more like mermaid, but the bird woman form is older. And their main weapon was the
irresistible song that lured sailors to their deaths.
Exact. Odysseus famously had his crew plug their ears with wax and tie him to the mast so he could hear it without crashing his ship. If Kratos heard their song, mythologically, he should have been instantly compelled, hypnotized, not just annoyed by them in a desert.
Giving them sonic scream attacks or making them desert dwellers, just changing them completely.
Pretty much ignores everything about them except the name. Same goes for centaurs, actually.
How are they changed? The game has them as these tough, disciplined warriors, sometimes commanders. They look at kind of fierce, almost monstrous faces.
Right. But in most myths, centaurs were, wild, savage, prone to drunkenness, violence, and sexual assault was a common. Think of the Centauromachi. The battle between the Lapiths and Cent broke out at a wedding when the centaurs got drunk and tried to carry off the bride and other women.
So not exactly disciplined soldiers.
Yeah, not usually. There were exceptions, like Chiron, the wise tutor, but mostly they represented untamed nature and chaos. The game cleans them up, makes them organized enemies, gives them those aggressive Baraka-style faces, as the notes say, makes them fit the army structure better.
Okay, let's talk about Kratos finding famous items or running into other heroes. Poseidon's trident, huge symbol of the sea god's power.
And Kratos finds it, lying around in a temple in Chains of Olympus.
Yeah, and he mostly uses it to breathe underwater.
Right. It's like finding Excalibur and using it as a letter opener. Poseidon's trident is meant to command the seas, cause earthquakes, shatter rock. It's a weapon of immense divine power, treating it like a scuba tank.
Yeah, it kind of diminishes its legendary status.
Then there's King Midas, fun sequence in God of War, Ghost of Sparta. Kratos dunks him in lava to turn it gold.
Great visual. But it breaks the fundamental rule of the Midas touch.
Which anything he touched turned to gold. Anything. Including his food, his drink. He was starving to death because even water turned to gold in his mouth.
Ah, so if Kratos touched him...
Kratos should have instantly become a solid gold statue. And Midas himself, touching the lava, should probably have just turned the surface layer gold, not the whole river. The game conveniently ignores the fatal downside of the curse to make the puzzle work.
And Kratos meets him in God of War 2. Old, mad, still has his wings.
Which is just bizarre. Icarus is famous for one thing, dying. He flew too close to the sun, the wax holding his feathers melted, and he plunged. That's the entire point of his story, the tragedy.
So him surviving to old age makes no sense.
None whatsoever. The myth death. And Kratos then rips his wings off and uses them. And these wings, which famously failed because of heat, somehow let Kratos glide through super hot environments without melting.
Yeah, the logic's a bit shaky there. It's just a way to give the player a glide.
Exactly. It sacrifices the entire meaning of the Icarus myth for a gameplay mechanic. It might have made more sense to encounter Daedalus, his father, the inventor who did survive.
Good point. Okay, last one for the Greek era. Prometheus. Kratos finds him being tortured by Zeus's eagle.
Right. Chained to the mountain, liver eaten daily. That part is accurate to the myth.
But Prometheus tells Kratos that Zeus made him mortal to increase his suffering.
Yeah, that's where it goes off the rails. The whole point of Prometheus' torture was that he was immortal. His liver regenerated every night so the eagle could eat it again the next day. That's the eternal torment. Making him mortal would end the suffering much faster. It makes no sense.
So he was always immortal in the myth.
Always. And his eventual fate in the myths. He doesn't get mercy killed by Kratos throwing him into the fire like in the game.
No, who frees him?
Heracles. Ages later, Heracles comes along, kills the eagle, and frees Prometheus, often with Zeus's eventual reluctance. The game gives Kratos the role of ending his suffering, but in a way that completely contradicts the mythology.
So the Greek saga game, they're like a greatest hits of Greek mythology, but remixed, reordered, and starring Kratos in roles he never played.
That's a good way to put it. It uses the familiar names and settings as a backdrop for Kratos' personal story, bending or breaking the original myths whenever need plot or...
Which leads us to the Norse saga. Part 3. Kratos moves north. New pantheon, new problem. And the core issue starts immediately with his relationship with Atreus.
Yeah, the father-son dynamic is central. But it rests on some very shaky mythological ground, particularly concerning Kratos' status.
Kratos' status first. The game itself seems a bit confused, right? Is he a god? Was he born one? Did he become one? The dialogue gets fuzzy.
It does get fuzzy. And Greek myth has rules, you know. To be a full god, you generally need 2 divine parents. Or... maybe you're a mortal hero granted immortality by the gods like Heracles eventually was. Kratos, with a mortal mother, Callisto, and Zeus as his father, is technically a demigod. He became the god of war, but his fundamental nature is ambiguous, especially when he arrives in the Norse lands, seemingly trying to suppress his identity.
That ambiguity feels intentional, maybe, to fit him into this new world.
Probably. But the really big twist, the one the whole Norse story hinges on, is Atreus.
Who turns out to be Loki.
Exactly. Atreus is Loki, a half-Jotun, half-god trickster, and Kratos is his father.
Which sounds cool, but Loki's father in Norse mythology wasn't a Greek demigod god-killer, was he?
No, not quite. Loki's father in the myths was a Jotun, a giant named Farbauti. His mother was Laufey, often implied to be a goddess or at least a significant figure.
So the game makes Kratos Farbauti.
Effectively, yes. Faye, Atreus' mother, calls Kratos Farbauti as a sort of nickname or secret name. By doing that, they graft Kratos directly into Loki's lineage. It's clever, narratively.
How so?
Because Loki is the father of the creatures destined to bring about Ragnarok, the wolf Fenrir, the world's serpent Jörmungandr, and Hel, the ruler of the dead. So by making Kratos Loki's father, Kratos becomes, indirectly, the grandfather of the apocalypse.
Whoa, okay, that ties him in deep.
Yeah.
But completely rewrites Loki's parentage.
Totally. Brilliant narrative engineering to connect the 2 sagas, but a massive departure.
Okay, let's talk about the first big antagonist Kratos and Atreus face. Baldur, the guy who can't feel anything.
Right. Baldur shows up. He's angry, violent, relentless, immune to all harm, and desperately wants...
How does that compare to the mythical Baldur?
Another 180. Like, the complete opposite. Mythological Baldur was the god of light, joy, purity, beauty. He was beloved by everyone. Wise, peaceful, gentle. His death was considered the greatest tragedy to ever befall the Aesir, the catalyst that eventually leads to Ragnarok.
So the game turns the nicest, most beloved god into a rage-filled, pain-seeking antagonist.
Pretty much. Again, it serves the game's need for conflict. An unkillable, angry god makes for a great recurring boss, but it completely sacrifices Baldur's actual character myths.
And the invulnerability. In the game, it's a spell Freya cast that also took away his ability to feel.
Yeah, that's the game's explanation. In the myth, it's a bit different. His mother, Frigg, who is often conflated or identified with Freya as the game does, was terrified by prophetic dreams of his death. So she went around and extracted an oath from everything fire, water, iron, stone, plants, animals, not to harm.
Everything swore the oath.
Almost everything. She thought mistletoe was too young and harmless to bother at, and that, of course, is what's spoiled.
So it wasn't a spell-removing sensation. It was a universal oath of protection.
Exactly. And mistletoe didn't just break the spell, like in the game where Baldur suddenly feels pain again before dying. In the myth, the mistletoe dart, guided by Loki into the hands of the blind god Hur, killed Baldur instant stone dead.
And Freya's reaction, the game has her swearing vengeance on Kratos.
Which sets her up as an antagonist for the sequel, right? In the myth, Frigg's reaction is utter devastation. Her grief is immense. She tries desperately to get him back from Helheim, even sending Hermo down to plead for his return. Hel agrees to release Baldur only if every single thing in the 9 realms weeps for him.
Did they?
Almost. Everyone and everything wept. Gods, humans, animals, earth, stones, trees, except for one giantess, Thok, widely believed to be Loki in disguise, who refused, so Baldur had to stay in Helheim. Frigg's tears, by the way, were said to be made of solid gold and
So profound grief and attempts at resurrection, not immediate vengeance.
Right. The game chooses vengeance for dramatic conflict, pitting mother against surrogate father figure.
Okay, let's look at the big boss, Odin, the All-Father. His spying methods seem upgraded in the game.
Yeah, the game gives him dozens, maybe hundreds, of these spectral green ravens, Hugin and Munin, acting as eyes and ears everywhere. Kratos and Atreus are constantly destroying them.
How many did he have in the myths?
Just two, Hugin, meaning thought, and Munin, meaning memory or mind. They flew out across the world each day and returned at evening to sit on Odin's shoulders and whisper all the news they'd gathered in.
So more like personal advisors, extensions of his own mind, rather than a swarm of surveillance drones.
Exactly. Much more intimate and definitely not bright green collectibles for the player down.
And Odin's reaction to Baldur's death. In the game, he seems almost pragmatically annoyed, maybe, before eventually trying to manipulate things against Kratos. How did mythical Odin react?
Mythical Odin's reaction was swift and brutal, pure vengeance. Immediately after Baldur's death, he fathered a new son, Vali, with the giantess Rindr. Vali grew to full adulthood in a single day, and his sole purpose was to avenge Baldur by killing Harar, the blind god who threw the mistletoe.
Wow. That's efficient.
And ruthless. And his revenge against Loki, who orchestrated it all. He had Loki bound to rocks with the entrails of Loki's own murdered son, Narf, with a serpent dripping venom onto his face.
Okay, so the game's Odin, who seems more manipulative and calculating, but less overtly brutal in his immediate response.
Yeah.
That's another shift.
It is. And his death in the game, sealed in a soul marble by Atreus Loki and then smashed by Sindri, is also great.
How does he die in the myth?
During Ragnarok, Odin leads the Aesir into battle, but is destined to be killed and swallowed whole by the giant wolf Fenrir.
Fenrir eats him. Okay, that's way more metal than being smashed in a marble.
Definitely a more epic, apocalyptic end for the altar.
And speaking of Ragnarok figures dying different, what about Heimdall, the watchman with the horn?
Yeah, Heimdall. Kratos kills him relatively early in Ragnarok.
But isn't he supposed to, announce Ragnarok?
Exactly. His job is to blow the Jallarhorn to signal the start of Ragnarok when the enemies approach Asgard. He needs to be alive for that. And more than that, he and Loki are fated to kill each other during the final battle. It's a mutual structure.
So killing him off before Ragnarok even properly begins.
It completely messes up the established sequence of events for the apocalypse. They had to find other ways to signal the end time and resolve Loki's fate because his fated killer was already...
Let's touch on Thor quickly. Big, imposing figure in the game. Any major discrepancies besides, being Kratos' main rival?
One fun little detail that Mimir actually mentions in the first Norse game but isn't shown visually on Thor in Ragnarok is about
the giant Thor thought.
Right. During their duel, Hrungnir's whetstone shattered when Thor threw Mjolnir at it. Pieces flew everywhere. One piece got lodged deep in Thor's forehead, and it stayed there for the rest of his life.
So Thor should have a piece of rock sticking out of his head.
According to the myth, Mimir recounts, yeah. But the game model is clean. A missed opportunity for a cool visual nod.
Maybe. And the politics between the gods... the Aesir like Odin, Thor, and the Vanir like Freya. The game kind of implies ongoing tension or past conflict.
They do reference the Aesir-Vanir War, but in the myths, that war happened very early on. It ended with a truce, an exchange of hostages. Freya, Freyr, and Urir went to live with the Aesir, while Hrungnir and Mimir went to the Vanir, and then they basically became allies. They weren't constantly feuding up until Ragnarok.
So the piece was pretty solid.
Yeah, they integrated. Freya became a major deity within the Aesir pantheon, though her role in the game as Queen of the Valkyries isn't quite right either.
No, who leads the Valkyries?
Freya does have a connection to the dead, ruling over her own afterlife hall called Folkvanger, where half the slain warriors go, the other half go to Odin's Valhalla. But the leader or Queen of the Valkyries is often considered Odin, who dispatched, or sometimes specific named Valkyries might lead group. It's not typically Freya.
Gotcha. And her brother, Freyr, god of sunshine, fertility. He's in the game, fighting alongside everyone.
Yep, alive and kicking, wielding his cool magical sword, Skidblanir, which is another problem.
Why? What's wrong with his sword?
Mythologically, Freyr gives away his magic sword. He falls desperately in love with the giantess Gyrir and offers his sword to his servant, Skirnir, as payment for helping him woo her.
So he doesn't have his sword later on?
Nope, and that's crucial. Because he gave away his unbeatable sword, when Ragnarok comes, he has to fight the fire giant Surtur armed only with an antler.
An antler. He fights the fire giant king with an antler.
Yeah, and perhaps unsurprisingly, he dies. Surt kills him.
But in the game, he's alive, has his sword, and fights bravely.
Right. The game keeps him alive and well-armed, making him a more effective hero in the final battle, but completely changing his tragic, swordless fate from the myth.
It really seems like the Norse games, like the Greek ones, rearrange everything to serve the Kratos-Atreus story and create specific conflicts and alliances.
Absolutely. Family ties, political history, individual fates, they're all remolded to fit the narrative they want to tell, placing Kratos and Atreus at the absolute center of this world's destiny, even if it means rewriting that.
Okay, let's move to part 4. Artifact, creatures, and the realms themselves in the Norse saga, starting with Kratos' main weapon, the Leviathan axe.
The iconic ice cool weapon, but completely invented for the game.
Not in Norse myth at all.
Nope, there's no Leviathan axe. The name Leviathan itself isn't even Norse, it's Hebrew.
From the Bible, the sea monster.
Exactly. Leviathan is a massive sea creature, sometimes described as a fire-breathing serpent from Jewish mythology in the Old Testament. Has nothing to do with Norse frost.
Is there any Norse weapon it might be loosely based on? People sometimes mention Leviatine.
Yeah. Leviatine gets brought up. It's a weapon mentioned in one poem, possibly meaning damage. It's sometimes interpreted as a sword, sometimes a dart or wand associated with Loki, but it's definitely not described as a giant throwing axe with ice powers forged by dwarves to counter Mjolnir. The Leviathan axe is pure Santa Monica.
What about Mjolnir then? Thor's hammer. The game gets that right, presumably.
Mostly, yeah. It returns when thrown, it causes light. But there are specific accessories Thor needs in the myths to wield it properly.
Accessories.
Yep. He needs Megingjör, a belt that doubles his already immense strength. And he needs Jorngrip, a pair of iron gauntlets, specifically to handle the hammer's power, and it's notoriously short.
Why was the handle short?
Loki interfered while the dwarves Brock and Sindri were forged, distracting them in the form of a fly, so the handle came out. Thor needs the iron gloves to grip it securely and stand its power.
Does he have the belt and gloves in the game?
He has the belt, Megingjör is mentioned and shown, but he often doesn't seem to be wearing the Jorngrip gauntlet. It's a small detail maybe, but the myths make them pretty crucial for handling.
Interesting. Okay, dwarven craftsmanship is a big theme. Brock and Sindri. What about Glap, the chain that binds Fenrir?
Gleipnir, usually spelled Gleipnir. In the game, it's depicted as a strong, but the myth is way cooler.
How so?
Gleipnir wasn't a chain at all. It was described as a thin, silken ribbon, smooth and soft, but it was unbreakable because it was made from impossible.
Impossible.
Like the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mouse, sinews of a bear, or wearing the breath of a fish, spittle of a...
Whoa, things that don't exist.
Exact. That's why it was unbreakable. It was magic woven from paradoxes, making it just a strong chain in the game, loses that incredible imagine.
Yeah, the ribbon made of nothing is much cooler.
What about Odin's ring? Another piece of dwarven magic. In the game, Kratos gets a spear version made by Brock, and it creates 4 duplicates when thrown.
What did the original ring do?
The original Draupnir was Odin's ring. Every 9th night, it would drip or produce 8 new golden rings of equal value, not 4. So 9 rings in total, the original plus 8 copies every 9. Symbol of infinite wealth and bounty. The game adjusts the number. Probably for gameplay balance here.
Makes sense. One thing they did connect well, though, was the Blades of Chaos, right? Kratos' old Greek weapon.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty clever bit of retconning, I thought. In God of War 2018, they explain the blades are infused with the primordial fire Kratos carries within him from his homeland, linking them back to the Greek concept of primal chaos.
So it gives them a reason to still exist and function.
Exactly. It grounds them thematically, suggesting their power source is more fundamental, more elemental than just being Greek. It bridges the gap pretty neatly.
Okay, let's talk realms and the inhabitant, Jotunheimer, the land of the giant. A big plot point is that the giants are basically all dead or hidden, wiped out by Odin before Ragnarok.
Yeah, Kratos and Atreus find Jotunheimer deserted, save for the bodies and phase props.
Is that accurate? Did the giants die out before Ragnarok?
Absolutely not. That's a huge change for the game's plot. In the myths, the Jötnar, the giants, are very much alive and kicking. An entire army of them sails to Asgard on the ship Naglfar for the final battle of Ragnarok, led by figures like Loki and Hrym. They are Odin's and Thor's primary adversaries in the final.
So wiping them out beforehand removes a huge part of the Ragnarok conflict.
It fundamentally changes it. It makes Ragnarok less of a massive war between gods and giants, and more of a targeted assault by Kratos and his allies against Odin. And the look of the giants, too. The game depicts them as these truly enormous kaiju-sized beings.
Like the ones Kratos sees dead in Jotunheimer.
Right. But again, like we discussed with the Greek Titans, Norse Jötnar weren't necessarily all colossal monsters. They were often depicted as roughly human-sized, maybe larger than the Aesir, but capable of intermarrying with them. Think Loki himself, half Jötnar. They weren't always skyscraper tall. The game seems to be going for that giant, absolutely massive visual again.
Okay, what about Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves? Sunny forests, lakes. Seems nice.
It does look nice in the game, but there's a problem.
What's that?
Dwarves in Norse mythology have a very specific weakness: sunlight.
Sunlight, what happens?
They turn to stone. It's a well-known rule. There's a famous story where Thor tricks the dwarf Elvis, all wise, into talking until sunrise, and poof, stone dwarf.
So Svartalfheim should be underground or perpetually dark.
Pretty much. It's often described as being subterranean, Nidavellir, Darkfield, a realm of caves, mines, and forges away from the sun. Having Brock and Sindri, our main dwarves, running around freely in sunny Midgard, Alfheim, even Asgard, completely ignores this fundamental. The game's Svartalfheim, being bright and open, makes no sense if dwarves turn to stone.
Again, gameplay and environment variety trumping the mythology.
Seems to be the case. And speaking of realms, Alfheim, realm of the elves. The game has the light elves and dark elves fighting over the light of Alfheim.
Yeah, this big source of energy in a temple. Is that from the myth?
Not really. Alfheim is the home of the light elfar. The dark elves, Kalfar, or Black Svartalfar, are usually said to reside underground, pos Svartal. The idea of a central light of Alfheim that they fight, which also creates solid bridges of light that seems largely invented for the game's plot. The main bridge between realms, Bifrost, the rain guarded by time.
Okay, let's talk creatures. Trolls. Big, dumb, rocky guys. Often under bridges in the game.
Yeah, the bridge troll is a classic fantasy trope, but it's actually from much later Scandinavian folklore, like 18th or 19th century folktales. Not from the original Norse myths, the Eddas.
Really? No bridge trolls in the myths?
Not specifically like that. Trolls exist in folklore, certainly, often as dangerous, dim-witted nature spirit, but the specific troll under the bridge demanding a toll comes later. And importantly, like Thor, trolls in folklore also often turn to stone in sunlight, another rule the game ignores for
What about Draugr, the undead warriors Kratos fights everywhere?
Draugr are definitely from Norse myth and saga. Powerful undead, often guarding their burial mounds. Super strong, sometimes magical. The game gets their basic concept right, but how you them?
Kratos uses his axe, sword, whatever. They disintegrate.
Mythologically, Draugr were notoriously hard to kill permanently. You often had to wrestle them back into their grave, decapitate them, place the head at their buttocks, burn the body completely, and scatter the ashes off.
Wow.
Yeah. Just hitting them with weapons often wasn't enough. They'd just get back up. The Leviathan axe, being ice-based, should arguably be less effective, given fire is often key to destroying undead. Again, gameplay requires a solution.
Okay, this next one feels big. The Norns, the weavers of fate. Kratos meets them in Ragnarok.
He does. Erd, past, Verdandi, present, and Skuld future. They live by the Well of Erd at the base of Yggdrasil, weaving the destiny of all beings. That part is accurate.
But what they say to Kratos, that's the issue.
It's a massive contradiction. They, the literal embodiments of inescapable fate in Norse cosmology, tell Kratos that fate isn't written, or there is no destiny, only choices.
The fates say there's no fate.
Exactly. It completely undermines their entire mythological function. They are destiny, they weave it. For them to deny its existence is.
Well, it's either a profound statement about Kratos' ability to break fate, or it's the game fundamentally rejecting the core Norse concept of destiny to empower player agency.
Or maybe Kratos, being from outside their system, genuinely unravels their power. That's a possible interpretation. His presence corrupts the thread, but it's a direct contradiction to their definition in the source. A really fascinating moment of adaptation, but undeniably inaccurate.
Okay, Valkyrie. Kratos fights corrupted ones in the first Norse game. Freeze. Sigrun is their queen.
Right. The Valkyries are Odin's choosers of the slain, guiding warriors to Valhalla. The game depicts them with physical, feathered wings that Kratos often rips off.
Can you just rip off a Valkyrie's?
Well, in many stories, their ability to fly comes from magical feathered cloaks or swan shift. They can take these off. They aren't necessarily physically part of their bodies, so ripping them off might not defend, kill, or ground. And Sigrun, she's a famous Valkyrie from the poems, yes, particularly loved by the hero Helge. But she wasn't the overall queen of all. As we said, that role is more complex, often tied Freya.
Gotcha. Last creature combo. Fenrir and Garm, the big wolf.
Yeah, the game does something interesting. Atreus' wolf companion, Fenrir, dies, but Atreus puts his soul into a knife and later uses it to revive Garm, the giant wolf guarding Helheim, effectively merging them. Garm then becomes Fenrir.
Is that how it works in the myths? Are they related?
Not really. Fenrir is Loki's son, the giant wolf destined to kill Odin. He's bound by the magical ribbon Gleipnir on a remote island called Ling Ragnarok. Garm, or Garm, is the hound who guards the gates of hell. He's often chained up, too, at the cave Niflheimr.
So they're two different giant wolves with different jobs.
Yes. Both are prophesied to break free at Ragnarok. Fenrir fights Odin, and Garm fights the god Tyr, each other. The game combines them, likely to simplify the number of giant wolves running around and to tie Garm's Helheim plot more directly into Loki's family drama with Fenrir.
Makes sense for streamlining.
Oh.
Okay, the sheer scale of these chains across both Greece and Norway, it's huge. Let's move to part 5, looking at the big picture. Timelines, crossover weirdness, and final detail.
Right. The timeline issues, especially in the Greek games, are pretty wild when you actually compare them to historical or mythological chronology.
Like Heracles showing up.
Yeah. In God of War 3, Heracles confronts Kratos. He acts like they're contemporaries, even mentioning Kratos becoming a god during his own time.
But Heracles lived way earlier.
Way early. If we roughly place God of War 1 around the Peloponnesian War era, say 431, 404, Heracles' traditional dates place his life maybe 700, 800 years before that, in the Mycenaean Bronze Age. He should be ancient history, a figure of myth within Kratos' time, not a rival showing up.
So Kratos couldn't have stolen the Hydra kill from him if Heracles lived centuries earlier.
Exactly. And it's not just Heracles. Perseus, who killed Medusa, he's generally placed even earlier than Heracles, maybe 4 generations before. Theseus, who killed the Minotaur, roughly contemporary with Heracles. Yet in the games, they can sometimes appear younger or as direct contemporaries of Kratos.
What about Jason of the Argonauts?
Jason's timeline is also compressed. Kratos encounters him, or his possessed corpse, in God of War 2. Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece is usually set in the generation before the Trojan War, which itself predates the Peloponnesian War setting. His death in myth, crushed by the stern of his own rotting ship, the Argo, is also unrelated to us.
And Argus, the 100-eyed giant.
Argus Panoptes, who guarded Io for Hera. He was slain by Hermes way back in the earliest myths, thousands of years before any plausible setting for Kratos. Yet he appears as a monster Kratos fights in one of the mobile games.
So the Greek games basically operate in a mythological present, where figures from vastly different eras all exist simultaneously for Kratos to encounter.
Pretty much. It's chronological chaos, completely disregarding the generational sagas and timelines established in the source. It serves, the gameplay lets you fight all the famous monsters and heroes, but it makes a mess of the actual mythological.
And it's not just Greek and Norse figures they pull in, right? The monster list gets pretty diverse.
Oh, yeah. They definitely borrowed liberally from other cultures to fill out the enemy roster, especially in the earlier. We already mentioned the Hebrew Leviathan for the axe name, but there's also the behemoth as a boss.
What else?
Well, you see creatures like kelpies, which are water horses from Celtic folklore, specifically Scotland. Wolvers, which are sort of benevolent werewolf figures from Scottish Shetland folklore. Manticores, the lion sphinx scorpion things, originate in Persian mythology.
I remember fighting Ifrit in one game. That's Arabian, right?
Yep. Ifrits are powerful jinn from Arabian and Islamic mythology. And basilisks, the serpent kings. While they appear in Greek writings later, their popular image comes more from medieval European legend.
So it's a real mythological melting pot.
Absolutely. It creates variety, but it sacrifices any sense of mythological authenticity to a specific region or tradition. It's purely about finding cool monsters to fight, regardless of origin. They even throw in historical figures like Archimedes, depicted building giant war machines, blurring the line between myth and history.
Okay, let's hit some final small details that map. Consumable. Red orbs for power. Gorgon eyes for health.
Pure video game mechanic. No basis in mythology. If anything, Gorgon eyes should turn you to stone, not heal you. And Gorgon blood had mythical properties. Blood from the left side was poison. Blood from the right side could heal or resurrect, but not the eyes themselves for health.
And Eon's apples in the Norse game, they grant health rage upgrade.
Idun's apples in myth grant perpetual youth and immortality to the Aesir. They're essential for the gods' survival. And they're always described as golden apples, not the green ones Kratos collects. A small visual change, but noticeable.
What about basic weapons, like Spartan spears? Kratos uses one that magically regenerates.
Yeah, the Spear of Destiny in Ghost of Sparta. Throws it, comes back. Spartans were famous for their spears, sure, but they were regular metal and wood spears. They didn't magically reappear after pure gameplay.
One last cultural detail from the Norse side. Thor talks about blood payments as compensation.
Right. The correct term for the complex Norse system of paying compensation for injury or death to avoid blood feuds is wirg, literally mangold or man price. It was a formal, legal, and social. Calling it just blood payments is an oversimplification that loses the cultural.
Okay. So after going through all of this, Kratos' true identity, the changes to gods, monsters, timelines, artifacts, even cultural terms, across 2 whole mythologies, what's the big takeaway? What's the final analysis on how God of War uses mythology?
I think the takeaway is that the developers clearly knew the mythology, they did their homework, but they made very deliberate strategic choices to deviate from it whenever it served their primals, creating a compelling narrative centered entirely on Kratos, designing spectacular gameplay, and ensuring emotional.
So accuracy wasn't the main goal. Adaptation was.
Yeah. Exactly. They used mythology as a foundation, a source of instantly recognizable characters and concepts, but they treated it like clay. They remixed timelines, merged characters like Freya Frigg or Fenrir Garm, exaggerated scales, inverted personalities like Baldurs, ignored inconvenient rules like dwarves turning to stone, all to build the specific story they wanted to tell about this one, incredibly angry outsider crashing through these ancient worlds.
It's less a retelling of myths and more a story using myths as building blocks. The drama comes from Kratos, the anomaly, defying the established order.
Precisely. His journey, his rage, his eventual growth, that's the core. The mythology is the stage, and they reshape the stage to fit the actor, not the other way around. The sheer volume of changes shows how purposeful that reshaping was.
Which brings us to a really interesting final thought, doesn't it? Something for you, the listener, to chew on. Especially think about Kratos bridging these two worlds.
Yeah, think about the Norns again. In Norse myth, they are absolute. They weave fate. Destiny is real, inescapable. It governs gods and mortals alike.
But in the game, they tell Kratos, this outsider, this ghost from Greece, that there is no destiny, only choice. He successfully defies prophecies throughout the Norse saga.
So the question is, does Kratos' success in breaking the Norse cycle mean that the original mythological concept of inescapable destiny was flawed all along? Or is it that only someone completely outside of that specific cosmic, a god killer from a different shattered pantheon, could ever possess the unique perspective, the sheer Kratos level force of will, needed to actually sever those threads and introduce true choice into a world previously bound by fate? What does it mean for a character by defying one mythology to then dismantle the core of another?